Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Stories for Hope podcast. I'm your host, Nicole, and in today's episode, we're going to hear a beautiful story about a boy named Simon, whose life was completely changed when he was sponsored by Peggy and Brian O'Rourke. For those of you who are new, Stories for Hope is a podcast run by Hope for Kids International. On this podcast, we share inspirational stories to inspire you to bring hope to those in need. Let's jump right in and hear from Peggy.
My name is Peggy O'Rourke, and I have a story for you today. If you have ever sponsored a child or have ever considered it and wondered if your sponsorship would really make a difference in the child's life, you probably want to listen to my story. On my husband's and my first trip to Uganda with Hope for Kids in 2016, a young boy at Smile Africa named Simon came up to Brian and put his hand in Brian's, and he never let go for the rest of the day. For those of you who are not familiar with Smile Africa, it is a partner of Hope for Kids, and it's a feeding program run by Pastor Ruth Kahawa. She started it many years ago and feeds over 400 children daily, providing them with 2 Feed My Starving Children meals each day. This program has enabled the Karamojong children, which are the poorest of the poor street children, to stay away from the street life and receive warm, nutritious food each day. Well, just by Simon being at Smile Africa, we knew that he was a street kid, probably very poor, and probably an orphan. Now, in Africa, an orphan can mean that you have one parent or no parents. We found out later, I don't know anything about his parents, but we found out later that he was living with his elderly grandmother. Later that day, after we left Smile Africa, we went to a nearby school, which was just a couple blocks away, and was also a school where many of these poor children attended. We were at that school and watching a program that the children were putting on. And Brian was sitting there, and all of a sudden he felt a hand in his. And he looked down, and there was Simon. Again, he never let go. So they walked around after the program together and talked, and Brian found out a little bit more information about him. Found out that was when he found out his name, and he also found out that he was in primary 3. And they just pretty much spent the day walking around together and talking. And by the time that we were ready to get back on the bus, they were pretty connected. Simon did ask Brian if he would sponsor him. And Hope for Kids had warned us that some of the kids that aren't sponsored will ask that question. And the best answer to give them is that you will pray about it. So that's exactly what Brian did. He told Simon that he would pray about it, and he wanted Simon to pray about it also. So Brian gets on the bus, and he literally has tears in his eyes because he wants so badly to tell this little kid that, yes, I will definitely sponsor you, but he knows that he can't. And as we drive away, Simon is running alongside the bus, waving and saying, I love you, Father Brian. I love you, Papa Brian. It was just the sweetest thing. Well, after we got home, a few weeks later, Simon was still on Brian's heart, and Brian said to me, you need to call Hope for Kids and see if we can sponsor Simon to see if he's eligible. So I did. I got a hold of Carmela, who used to be the director of sponsorship, and I said to her, we wanted to support this kid in Smile Africa. And she kind of laughed and said, that would be like finding a needle in a haystack. And I said, well, I do have his picture with Brian, and I also know that where he saw him and where he goes to school, and I know he's in primary 3, and I know his name is Simon. So that shouldn't be too hard. She laughed again, and she said, I'll do what I can. So a few weeks later, she got a hold of us, and she said, I found him. and he is eligible for sponsorship. So we were so excited. We started sponsoring him right away and writing letters back and forth. And I actually, on my first letter, sent him a picture of he and Brian that day because I wanted him to know who his sponsor was and that, we had prayed about it and that we had found him and Brian was sponsoring him. So anyway, a few years later, we made a second trip to Uganda in 2018. And one of the highlights of that trip was seeing Simon again. He had grown. He looked really well. He was doing very well in school. He looked healthy, and he was so excited to see us. One of the things that he kept saying over and over again at the sponsorship day was, "I am so proud of you. I'm so proud of you." And I asked Carmela, why is he saying that? Why is he proud of us? And she told us that that was really his way of saying thank you. Like, I'm so proud of you for sponsoring me. Like, that's such an awesome thing that you're doing. But it was so sweet that he just kept saying that over and over again all day. Anyway, we spent the day with him. Brian had a guitar with him, and he and Simon sat and played the guitar a little bit. And once again, Simon had his hand in Brian's or his hand on his arm or his back or something. It's like he just would not let go. So anyway, we said goodbye and continued to write letters back and forth. Thought we were going to see him in 2020, but obviously all the trips were canceled because of COVID. So during those years that nobody was traveling, we were sending letters back and forth, and we knew that he was doing well. Well, in 2022, after the kids had been pretty much in lockdown for 2 years, all the children were tested to see where they should be placed because they had been out of school for so long. Now, some of the kids were able to continue their lessons by way of solar-powered radios. And I believe that Simon was one of those kids because he did live in Truro, which is near the Hope for Kids main campus. All the children were tested to see where they should be placed. And we got a call from Hope for Kids, and much to our surprise, they told us that Simon had tested very high, that he had tested way above what was expected, and that he had a pretty high intelligence. In fact, his scores were so good that they were recommending that he be placed in the Fairmont Christian boarding school that is on the new Hope for Kids campus. So you can imagine we were elated. We were so happy for him. This is an opportunity that not many Ugandan kids ever get, let alone a street kid. So we, again, were writing letters with him all of 2022 and up until we went to see him just in July of 2023. And he seemed like he was doing very well, and he was very appreciative of us sending him to boarding school. So on our recent trip in July, we were reunited with Simon after 5 years. He is no longer a little boy, but a young man who has a great future ahead of him. When we first arrived on the campus, there were 200 kids greeting us, and probably 50 or so from our team and from Hope for Kids that were coming onto the campus. And right away, he spotted us and came right over to us and gave us a big hug. It was just so sweet and just so great to be reunited. He walked with us, and we got a chance to really talk to him, find out more about his goals and things that he wants for his life. Probably for the first time that we had, since we met him, we were actually able to talk to him like a young adult instead of like a little kid. He told us that he loves chemistry and biology and that he wants to be a doctor. We also found out that he'd been elected by his classmates to be prefect of his class, which is like being elected to student government. So we were really proud of him on that end too. He just seems like he's just doing so well in that environment. So the way we look at it is that only God could give a little orphaned street kid the confidence to go up to a stranger and make friends with him that day back in 2016. That simple act inspired us to sponsor him. We love this guy and we're so proud to call him our son, and we are very excited to see how his future unfolds. But we know he has the gumption to do whatever he sets his mind to. And we were also told and by his teachers and also by him that he has a huge faith, and that faith gives him so much hope. So like I started out with by saying, if you've ever sponsored a child or you've ever considered it and wondered if your sponsorship would really make a difference in the child's life, I hope that our story gives you the answer to that question.
Thank you, Peggy, for sharing with us. While thousands of miles may separate us, the love between a sponsor and their sponsored child remains strong. Sponsorship is a beautiful way that we can put God's call into action. We are instructed to care for all of the children of the earth out of a spirit of love, care, and mercy, the same that God has shown us. We've got kids around the world in need of sponsorship. If you feel a pull in your heart to start sponsoring a child, we'd love to get connected with you. You can learn more by going to h4ki.org. Thanks again for joining us as we continue to share inspiring stories. Have a blessed day, everyone.